Personally, I've been attending meetings in this series for more than 50 years, and I've always found them interesting, enjoyable, and worthwhile. I'm sure that you'll do the same, whether you're a first-time visitor to the meetings or an old hand at them. We really welcome you here, and Botany 2011, Healing the Planet, promises to be a really memorable event. We must, as a human race, achieve a stable population level, accept a justifiable level of consumption for everyone worldwide, and develop a whole array of new technologies that can help us do more with less. Population, consumption, technology. Getting there will involve empowering women and children in all societies and striving to make it possible for every single human being in the world to express their abilities fully for their own benefit, the benefit of their families, and ultimately for our common welfare. Although these goals may seem utopian and wholly visionary, we have no moral or practical alternative to pursuing them as vigorously as we are able. Possible renewable sources of energy, as well as ecosystem services of inestimable value. They fill our lives with beauty and hope and have inspired artists, poets, humanists throughout the course of human history. Our opportunities to build a sound and sustainable future rest implicitly on the characteristics of the living world and the way in which we maintain it. Nothing but the living world is truly sustainable. Countering our dreams and aspirations, we're driving to extinction a major proportion of all life on Earth, and doing so more rapidly than at any time in the past 65 million years since the end of the Cretaceous period. To the extent that we can estimate it, the rate of biological extinction has climbed by several orders of magnitude from the rate that's existed for the past 65 million years. And all of that climb virtually has taken place in the 10,000 years, 400 human generations, since our ancestors first learned how to cultivate crops and domesticate animals around the eastern end of the Mediterranean. The explosion that resulted from the ready and sustainable supplies of food made possible by the agricultural revolution took us from a level estimated at several million people 10,000 years ago to, with widely scattered bands of hunter-gatherers, to a rapidly growing 7 billion people today, with such profound effects on the earth that people are now starting to talk of an Anthropocene era, an era in which human beings dominate the geology, the functioning, and all of life of Earth, and all of life on Earth, modifying our home planet and destroying its life systems wantonly and mostly without focusing on any of the problems that I've just outlined. With a third of the world's land surface cultivated or grazed by domestic animals, and every square centimeter everywhere on Earth being affected continuously by the activities of human beings, we're clearly moving rapidly towards the creation of a world that is less diverse, more uniform, and with many fewer possibilities than the one into which we were born. The rate at which we are destroying species, their genetic diversity, and their habitats can only be termed astonishing. It is so rapid that, as Peter Wise Jackson has mentioned, half or more of all the species on Earth could have vanished permanently by the end of the 21st century, a disappearance that will deny many possibilities to ourselves and to those who come after us, but one that we're acting very tardily and ineffectively to address. The major factors involved in the disappearance of species are habitat destruction, global climate change, the rapid spread of alien organisms, including pests and pathogens and diseases, the overharvesting of selected species of plants and animals for food, medicine, and other purposes. Now turn to botany. What do we botanists have to contribute to the solution of these problems and to human welfare generally? We've historically assumed that what we learn will enhance our prospects for the future and perhaps help us to lighten our load on the earth. In that respect, to the extent that that's true, we should be very pleased with our progress. Personally, when I entered university in 1953, the same year in which Watson and Crick wondered whether DNA might be the genetic material, the first transmission electron micrographs were just coming out, and people were wondering what all those weird structures in them might mean and how much they were artifacts of staining and preparation. Nothing about the organization of cells was particularly clear in the 1950s. We looked at them in sort of gushy bags of little floaters, sort of like in your eyes, and somehow they were getting together and doing it. But in short order, many discoveries were made. Our view of life rapidly became much sharper and more detailed than we would have dared to imagine. Teaching biology at Stanford University in the 1960s and writing the first edition of our text, The Biology of Plants, at the end of that decade, I soon learned firsthand just how rapid the progress had been and was at the time that I was writing and attempting to scramble to get hold of it. Eukaryotic genetics, genomics, proteomics, complex systems theory, the whole unfolding of the science of ecology as we know it today. These have been among the intellectual and factual advances that have taken place during my own career in botany. The book that we wrote was intended to apply the newly discovered basic biological principles directly to the study of plants so that we could take advantage of the new information in teaching about them and understanding them as fully as possible. We were trying to move botany back towards the mainstream. Partly as a result of the trends just reviewed, many of us worry in various ways about the fact that our science, botany, has been dying over the past half century. I don't agree and believe that to answer that question properly, we have to take thoughts that must be highly qualified and nuanced to reflect accurately what's really been taking place. Traditional botany departments as separate academic entities slowly began to absorb the remarkable findings of the new biology. Their curricular tended to remain traditional, and they were sometimes slow to grasp the importance of what was really going on in biology. As time went by, the core of biology, how cells and molecules function, how living organisms achieve their remarkable diverse forms, and indeed how simple some of the basic principles were when we came to understand them properly, expanded. And all biologists had to assimilate a large core of exciting new material to understand the basics of the field. To teach these principles well in a series of separate departments came to seem less and less reasonable because of the bulk and common nature of the material involved, and fused departments were rapidly formed all over the country. What is distinctive about plants are a number of things: their growth patterns, hormones, secondary metabolites, patterns of diversity, particularly the form of the diversity, and their place in ecological systems. But that is not the base, for the most part, for understanding their cellular and molecular biology, but rather constitute a set of features based on those common principles and modified in certain ways to give plants. And it certainly seemed logical to teach those basic principles first before going on to the specialized aspects of plants. Where the original departments, the original botany departments, often included mycologists, bacteriologists, ecologists, and many other kinds of biologists, after they were merged, all those people disappeared into the background, and say the number of botanists that are here is really very small. If they had applied those same criteria to the original botany departments, they would have found that the number of botanists there were really very small too. The definition switched, and a very narrow definition has all too often been used to prove that botany is dying out. No wonder that we feel we're disappearing so rapidly. We do it ourselves by modifying the count. Against this background, however, it's important to emphasize the fact that relatively little scientific emphasis has been placed on the special features of plants as opposed to those of microbes and animals, regardless of departmental structure. During the past 30 years or so, plant studies have been strengthened considerably, and we've learned a great deal about plant biology, but this has been very slow coming. Mary Clutter, who will speak later at these meetings, deserves a great deal of credit for her role at NSF in making possible increased funding for the plant sciences, including the initiation of the highly productive Plant Genome Project. And there have been many other instances in which our knowledge of plants and how they functioned has expanded well beyond anything that I could have imagined as a student in the 1950s. Virtually the whole field of ecology, we often forget, has developed during this period of time. When I was in university in the 1950s, ecology was sort of a laugh. It was something very peripheral, unimportant, and unscientific. But boy, look at them now. A realization of the ways in which ecosystems function and the complex and largely unknown, still largely unknown interactions in them is gradually coming to us. And at the same time, we understand plant growth at a depth that would have seemed impossible to attain a few years ago, basing a lot of our work on the model organism Arabidopsis. Outstanding new findings are accumulating monthly. Important advances have also been made in our understanding of the relationships of photosynthetic organisms, the effort epitomized by the Tree of Life program funded by the NSF, and initially, especially by the realization first that prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms are fundamentally different, and then by the discovery of archaea as a very distinct group of prokaryotic organisms, and finally by the demonstration that plastids, mitochondria, and other organelles in the cells of eukaryotes had originated following the incorporation of symbiotic prokaryotes into eukaryotic cells. Genome comparisons, now commonplace and destined to become much more so in the future, have helped also to reveal the evolutionary relationships of plants to a degree that earlier has been unthinkable. Mentioning one field, it was dogma when I was at university in the 1950s that studies of fossils would never yield much of value, and that certainly would not yield much of value concerning the origin and evolution of the flowering plants. The magnificent work prepared by Peter Crane, Elsa Marie Fries, and their colleagues, which is in press at Cambridge, will show how modern techniques have made it possible to view microfossil assemblages of all stages of the Cretaceous and to lay out the evolution of flowers in a way that is truly remarkable. You will find this book rather unbelievable. And certainly Dave Dilcher and Bill Crepay and many others have contributed richly to those findings. If the knowledge of plants is growing so rapidly, why do we think that botany is faltering? Part of the reason has to do with the organization of departments. Part of it has to do with envy on the rapid growth of molecular and cellular biology, which is as much botany as it is zoology. These advances have contributed directly to the advances in botany, but they do make us feel nostalgic about what we consider traditional botany. Now, I hope that these outstanding meetings in botany and economic botany with the associated societies will prove to be, as they always have, a joyous occasion for sharing information, meeting new friends and colleagues, and making plans for the future. And it's appropriate to pause and congratulate all those who've been working long and hard to put this meeting in place.